If Star Citizen does one thing well, it's craft beautiful ships. After all, it's how the game funds itself. But sometimes I suspect that the ship designers get a little bit bored and want to do something a little different, like make a profoundly ugly ship. A ship so ugly that it goes full circle back around to somehow looking good. That is the Crusader Intrepid for me. It's crafted from a design language that I've previously said is one of my favorite in the game, and does something a little different than any other ship in the lineup with its interesting asymmetrical silhouette, which, to give credit to CIG, has gotten better since they upgraded the gun from a size 3 to a size 4, and probably could look even better if that gun were just a little bit bigger, which is what I suspect the original concept internally was supposed to look like. So let's dive into this new premium starter ship, where I'll show you the ins and outs of it and let you know how I feel about it. And if by the end you guys like the video and you want to see more, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button to show your support. While its silhouette may not strike anybody as the most beautiful in the Star Citizen universe, its details certainly live up to other ships that have been recently released by CIG. The Intrepid is really well put together. Front to back, even on the inside, everything looks really good. But it's that overall design that seems to defy a bit of expectation for what a spaceship should look like. And of course, the knee-jerk reaction to that is gonna be maybe not super positive. Here's my reaction on stream when I first saw it. I'm hard-pressed to find a good angle. It's hard to find a good angle of this ship. But then I realized after a while, sometimes if you want to create something really memorable, some new and interesting design, that you gotta buck the trend and think outside the box. And it doesn't always work out, especially if things change a little bit later down the line and affect the overall reading of it. And I think that that's what's happened with the Intrepid. Choosing to offset the cockpit so that the weapon has as equal amount of prominence as the typically most important space, the place that you operate the ship from, suggests that the designer wanted us to feel that the weapon was really important, like it was a defining characteristic of the Intrepid. And if you look closely around the weapon itself, you can see that there's a lot of embellishment around it. It's not just a standard mount. There's a whole thing that cuts out the hull plating that goes midway to the back of the ship to make it seem like this is a really big and important, powerful part of the ship. When in the end, it's just a standard weapon mounted inside. They could have added a standard mount like any other ship in the game, but they chose to do it this way. What does that remind you of? If you thought about the Starfighter by Crusader, the same manufacturer, you're right. It suggests a relationship with the Ion and the Ares, two ships that have a single coaxially mounted size 7 weapon as the main feature of the ship, the only weapon it really has aside from missiles, a defining characteristic of that ship. I don't think it's a coincidence that it's the same manufacturer, that it's trying to embellish a single weapon. I think the original concept was probably like a mini version of that, with a bespoke weapon that was integrated into the ship like this, but it got changed at some point, and well, the result is a more unbalanced look than it would have otherwise had. Take a look at this sketch. If we just continue the language that they started in the hull out and now look at its balance with the cockpit, I think it looks a lot better this way. I think that this is how it was imagined. It visually now has balance. Even though the two sides aren't exactly the same, visually the weight is similar, and that's how really good asymmetric design, I think, is accomplished. You still counterbalance that asymmetry with something on the other side. Visually it has the same weight, but the technical detail is different. The result, I think, is a much more satisfying looking ship, but not everything is perfect in my mind still. The rear engines, for example, seem to be a little too small in the rear profile, and they don't really follow up with any detailing on the top of the ship like other Crusader ships in the same lineup. Vertically, the ship also feels a little bit chonky, and I think they tried to offset that with the paint scheme, with the black underside and the white topside, to try to slim it down visually a little bit. It does help, but it still feels a little pudge. And these winglets at the top, well, I'm not a big fan of them being pointed inward like this. They feel too close to each other and more like they wanted to be on the wingtips or somewhere else. I'm not sure. It just doesn't feel super good to me here. And then finally, the cockpit is a little bit of a departure from other Crusader ships. A lot of the Crusader ships we've seen had the canopy bending over the nose and around a little bit underneath the pilot. Here, it just ends with a new type of detail we've not seen before. The same thing happens just above the pilot's head. Instead of continuing that line directly above the head, like a lot of other Crusader ships do, it just kind of cuts back a little bit. So there's some interesting decisions here that feel a little different, but overall it still feels like a Crusader ship. I can still see the relationship, but especially in the canopy and the engine, it feels a little bit forced. I think the artist should have felt a little bit more free to riff off of the original ideas and come up with some related but slightly different results. But like I said at the start, the whole design has grown on me, and I like it for its out-of-the-box thinking. I feel like it gives it a lot of character. It's an unmistakable silhouette, and I think some people are going to love it, but definitely some people are going to hate it. It's just up to you whether or not it's for you. But now I think it's time we spent some time on the interior because, while the exterior may be a bit divisive, the interior is definitely one of the better examples we've seen in Star Citizen to date. So let's take a peek inside. Entry to the Intrepid happens on the ship's port side opposite to its single weapon through a typically over-engineered integrated door panel that swings out and off to the side. I say it as a compliment though. I love the way that this has been designed, and I love it when CIG designs really complex mechanical door designs like this. It's so cool to see. Stepping in then, we're greeted by a Crusader Industries logo and a brand new interpretation of the Crusader interior design language that I think has been done fairly well. The Intrepid is a small ship without much space to spare, so the cylindrical interior design that we saw on the C1 wouldn't have worked here. Instead, the designers have opted to make a more vertical language that still uses some ribbing and lighting integrated into the structure like the other ships, but instead uses a soft octagon shape for the overall form of it. I think it works really well. Coupled with the distinct Crusader color palette and material selection, it feels a part of the Crusader family. Heading off, the rear of the ship contains a component access area and an engineering console for the upcoming engineering gameplay. An interesting choice on a ship this size, but a welcome one that'll give newer players an option to experience this part of the game earlier before they, get really big and expensive ships. The most interesting part of this space, though, has to be the bespoke cargo hatches that have lowering cargo grids for ease of access on the exterior of the ship. There are 2 on either side, and as a bonus, they can double as an alternative route off the ship if you get in trouble. I think the cargo area demonstrates a further maturity of CIG's ship design that takes into consideration the more recent updates to the cargo physicalization that makes it easier to take boxes on and off. I think more ships like this need to have this kind of design, and I hope that older ships can get a gold standard pass to integrate this kind of ease of access. Returning forward though, the midship gives access to the habitation quarters. The Intrepid boasts an impressively well-configured and efficient space that makes really good use of sharing circulation space with other programs, a technique I've seen well employed in the Asian markets, using them in micro-apartments where space is at a premium. The dining area with its cozy bench seats share a hall with the kitchenette, while a more dimly lit cozy bunk area shares space with the suit locker and the well-considered weapon locker that has room for standard heavy and even ammo for those weapons. Only the bathroom, though, gets its own door, which makes sense for, sanitation reasons. It's not fun to smell stuff while you're trying to get some sleep. It's hard to criticize this space at all, but I think some additional things could have been done. Like, I feel like there was a missed opportunity to make a folding table for the dining area to give a little bit more area for counter space. There also could have been a window in this room to relieve the compression and give an occupant the sense of what's outside. Again, Seiji, more windows please. Please add more windows to ships. Also, don't close yourself in the suit locker because there is no button to let yourself out. I guess it doubles as a brig then. I found that out the hard way. Next though, let's finally take a step onto the flight deck. It's a small ship, there's not a lot to look at, so this is going pretty quickly actually. Along the corridor here, they once again make great use of space with additional access hatches for ship systems. It's going to make maintenance, I think, super easy going into the future with the new engineering system, so it'll be a real great new ship to introduce players to that mechanism when that system comes out. But the real star of the show here is where the ship is flown from, the flight seat. It's well detailed and borrows ideas from other Crusader ships with the same kind of color palette and even some really nice detailing like this tasteful Crusader logo just to the side of the seat. I really like the way this works. And of course, sitting in it brings you up to the flight controls like other ships, which is elevated above the interior ship deck. At the flight controls though now, you can see that there's actually pretty good visibility in the ship. Visibility up and to the sides is really good, while downward is typically just okay. Another surprise here though is the choice of a yoke instead of a stick and throttle, suggesting the ship is probably imagined to play a non-direct combat role. The instruments are clear though and well laid out, with a good deal of functional buttons to make the operation of it easy for new users as well as for new players and pilots. But how does it fly? Well, the Intrepid's not the most nimble or fast ship available of its class, but it does both fairly well in most activities. The ship seems geared more towards non-combat activities like hauling. Even its single-size 4 weapon isn't going to put up much of a threat against targets, and its single-size 1 shield isn't going to make it particularly tanky against anything. Still, I managed to take out some entry-level bounties, just given that I was able to dodge and evade enough and had good enough aim, so if you've got some good aim and you're ready to try, it should do alright. It's just not a very survivable ship then. In my mind then, the Intrepid's worst issue isn't that it's asymmetrical, but instead that it's got a bit of a crisis of identity. While its overall design draws the eye to its single weapon and embellishes it to say it's a powerful thing and it wants to be used, the reality is that it's a single size 4 and it only has a single size 1, so it's really poorly suited to actually get into any kind of combat, even entry-level combat. It feels like the design's execution through to functionality wasn't well considered. There was a disconnection halfway through. If the ship was meant to be an explorer or courier, a design that didn't embellish the single weapon probably would have been better suited so as not to confuse its purpose. As it stands then, while the Intrepid offers one of the best detailed, most functionally complete interiors for a starter available in Star Citizen to date, its lackluster offense and defense will make it a poor choice over any long-standing suggestions like the Avenger Titan, which is still my #1 suggestion for new players. Even if it were to fit a bespoke size 5, the single size 4 and dual size 3s of the Titan would still outperform it. While the Titan's extra size 1 shield gives it more survivability, while its 8 SCU rear cargo space with ramp access matches the Intrepid's 8 SCU but gives the owner the option to park a vehicle instead. By near every metric then, the Intrepid is outclassed. I can only see it providing any kind of value if it's priced alongside the Aurora or the Mustang at $45, or even the Cutter's $60, but it's hard to imagine that that's actually going to be the case. My guess is that it's going to be a bit more expensive, so I'm just annoyed here that they didn't try to target that sweet spot to try to knock the Titan off its pedestal. Overall then, I think the design of the Intrepid gives it a unique character that will surely be loved by some, while its interior will be the envy of pretty much everybody in ships of its class. However, its lackluster performance and utility puts it in a strange spot with other ships. In its price range, they're probably going to make other ships a better choice. I think a unique large weapon would have gone some ways to solve this issue, but it may have not been enough. What are your thoughts? Do you like the UGO Crusader Intrepid? If not, what starter do you prefer over this one, and what changes to the Intrepid would make it a more appealing choice? Let me know down below, and of course, if you like this video, you know what to do. Hope to see you in the next one.